You're watching Afternoon Live. Let's get more now on that breaking story. The death of the actress and singer Doris Day, the 97-year-old who's best remembered for starring roles in Calamity Jane and Pillow Talk. Well, she was one of the biggest stars during the golden age of Hollywood. With me now, our entertainment correspondent Lisa Mazimba. Actually, I've read descriptions of her as the biggest star Hollywood ever had.
That's always arguable when you look at the different eras, but I think what is absolutely true is that she was one of the biggest stars in the world throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, and of course she was one of the last remaining people from what we nostalgically and accurately call the golden age of Hollywood.
A gentler age.
Yeah, a gentler age. Perhaps it's only the likes of Kirk Douglas who are still with us from that particular time. And she, of course, she portrayed this wonderful girl next door type that endeared her to millions of fans across the world, even though actually for the time those movies were actually quite sexy and daring, you know, nothing to what we see today. But even then she was seen as a really strong female character of the like that hadn't really been seen in Hollywood before. Of course, unfortunately, the wonderful warm projection that we saw of her on screen wasn't really reflected in her private life, which was tumultuous to say the least. You know, a string of marriages that didn't work out for various reasons, and in her latter years she really devoted herself to one cause that she really cared about, and that was her animal foundation and caring for animals. So one of those, you know, Hollywood stars that really decided to use their fame to try and make things better for others.
She managed to, as well as Hollywood, of course, she had her own TV show. Yeah. And we all know the song "Que Sera Sera." I mean, she had so many strings to that bow.
Yeah, she wasn't a huge fan of Que Sera.
Maybe not. It did it well though.
Perhaps, but it's one of the songs that absolutely, defines her. A wonderful recording artist, the TV show, as you say, and you know, she was really seen as somebody who was one of those genuine, multi-talented cinema figures who could do almost anything she turned her hand to, and you know, that is why she, you know, will be remembered, I think, with such fondness. One of the last people of that, you know, that age of Hollywood where they did absolutely everything. They sung, they danced, they acted beautifully. They made, you know, audiences, you know, holler and weep and cheer at everything they actually did. And of course, that girl next door figure that she liked to portray, you know, in the 1960s, the late 1960s, when the sexual revolution really kind of took off, she found herself slightly out of step with that. It didn't sit with the kind of film she wanted to make. She turned down the role of Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate. She thought that, you know, the script was kind of vulgar, and so she moved into other things. She had her marvellously successful TV show, and as I say, you know, in the latter years of her life, and I say, you know, latter years, actually we're talking nearly half a century, she was devoted to her animal causes. It was her animal foundation who announced the news of her death a few hours ago, and that was the thing she really, really cared about. When she finally, after many offers, accepted the Presidential Medal of Freedom from the American president at the time, it was because it wasn't just for entertainment, it was for services to animal welfare as well. And those were the two things that defined her career: entertainment and animals, and she was equally passionate about both.
Lisa, thank you very much. Lisa Mazimba. Hello everyone, this is Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy. Doris Day, one of the biggest Hollywood stars of the 50s and 60s, has died at the age of 97. Her foundation said she'd been in good health until recently when she contracted pneumonia. Well, our correspondent David Silito has been looking back at her illustrious career.
We'll be home tonight by the light of the silver
Doris
moon.
Day, cracking her whip as Calamity Jane. No one symbolised the Hollywood of the 50s and early 60s better. Good-natured musical escapism.
So whip crack away, whip crack away, whip crack away.
Born Doris Kappelhoff in 1922, she had one ambition: to be a ballet dancer. But after being injured in a car crash, she began singing instead.
My love.
By 16, she was Doris Day and touring with a band. A chance film audition made her an overnight star.
You say the song begins, you speak and I hear violins. It's magic.
It was the first of a string of musicals and launched a successful recording career. But the public image belied a darker private life. Her 4 marriages ended unhappily. Her first was violent and unnervingly close to the on-screen relationship with James Cagney.
You can't tell me what to do.
In a pig's eye, I can't.
George, you think you own me?
You're right, Ione. That's exactly right.
But she's best remembered for her romantic comedies. They were glamorous, witty, and very innocent.
You ain't the kind of gal who'd break a date.
No, I'm not.
And I ain't the kind of guy that'd ask you to.
I know you're not.
I'll pick you up at 8.
I'll be ready.
I had a great time, and I think that they sensed it. That fun. And wear all the gorgeous clothes and work with Rock Hudson and Jimmy Garner and Clark Gable, you know. I mean, how bad can it be?
For the public, Doris Day was the all-singing, all-smiling icon of a lost Hollywood.
Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
One of the last Hollywood greats, Doris Day, who's died at the age of 97. You're watching Afternoon Live from BBC News. Let's get more now on our main story. And while we've been on air, the announcement of the death of the actress and singer Doris Day, the 97-year-old who's best remembered for starring roles in Calamity Jane and Pillow Talk, was one of the biggest stars during the golden age of Hollywood. Well, Stella McCartney has tweeted, "The one, the only, the woman who inspired so much of what I do, Doris Day. I love you, my Calamity Jane, an iconic woman who I was hugely honoured to meet and share precious moments with. Rest in peace." That message on Twitter. Let's speak now to Neil Shawn, media correspondent and filmmaker. I mean, you met her, you knew Doris Day.
Oh, Simon, you know, Doris Day was a Hollywood legend, without a doubt, you know, one of the biggest. What's interesting, though, is I was lucky enough to speak with her. I never actually met her in person because she only took phone calls at that time, but I became very friendly with other Hollywood legends like Mickey Rooney, Debbie Reynolds, and those sort of people would connect me. Now, Doris herself could not understand that people still remembered her, simply because she'd retired from that world. You know, she'd totally changed her life, so she thought. But what Doris really gave everyone was kind of like a nice cozy world with wonderful songs, and this was a person truly that could do it all. She could sing, dance, act, but she didn't totally believe in herself. I remember her saying to me that she really admired people like Judy Garland and you know, Sinatra and people like that. She didn't put herself in that league, but for me she surpassed, or was certainly equal to those in every single way. A brilliant, brilliant person.
But she was the epitome of a much gentler time, wasn't she? There was an innocence of about the films that she appeared in.
Well, you say that actually, Simon, but what she told me was when they first made, you know, the Rock Hudson comedies like Pillow Talk and that sort of thing, she said that actually some of the shots had to be reshot because Doris appeared in a negligee, and this apparently was very racy in 1959. Now, what we know now is, of course, she would have been incredibly safe with Rock Hudson, but at that time they were billed as this wonderful golden couple, and I think what people liked about it was the fact that she was kind of very glamorous. She was the every woman, the all-American woman, but people related to her because she was non-threatening, and I think that was part of her success, along with, of course, that magnificent golden voice and all those wonderful songs she gave us.
But also a troubled private life, 4 marriages, the death of her son as well.
Yeah, I mean, very, very sad life, actually. But again, you know, Doris basically managed to pick the wrong men each and every time. And the reason why, I don't know if people know this, but the reason why really she came into television in the 70s was because when her last husband died, he'd gambled all of her fortune away, and she had to go back to TV, she had to go back to work, simply to get some money for herself to continue to live. But she didn't hold grudges. She spoke of all of the people that she'd been associated in her life with grace and kindness. So that was truly the sort of person she was. I think the biggest thing, you know, for her really was the fact that people of my generation and younger, you know, she has lots and lots of fans still today. I think she was just amazed that people still remembered her with such great affection.
Yeah, your generation and indeed mine. At the risk of you saying, as Doris told me one more time, of course in latter years she had another obsession, and that was animals and the welfare of animals.
Well, that was her true passion. I think, you know, if she could have done another career, it certainly would have been involving animals. And it was an interesting thing, because when she starred in a movie called Move Over Darling alongside James Garner, that was a remake of the ill-fated last Marilyn Monroe movie, Something's Got to Give. Doris even wore some of the costumes. But part of the attraction of that movie was the fact that it featured a dog. And that's the reason why she signed on. So if you can imagine the power of what, you know, if you're a Hollywood producer and you said, you know what, 101 Dalmatians, Doris, you're going to be in it, she'd have snapped that role up for sure.
Neil, good to see you again.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Neil Sean there. And tonight on BBC 4 at 8 o'clock, the documentary Doris Day, Virgin Territory, covering her early years as a band singer and her troubled life, is broadcast. That's on BBC 4 at 8 o'clock tonight. Hello, you're watching Afternoon Live. I'm Simon McCoy. Today at 4.
My love.
Hollywood actress Doris Day, best known for such films as Calamity Jane and Pillow Talk, has died at the age of 97. And if you would like to see more on any of those stories, you can access them via the BBC iPlayer. And a reminder, we go nationwide every weekday afternoon at 4:30 here on Afternoon Live.
Now, Doris Day, one of the biggest names in the history of Hollywood, has died at her home in California at the age of 97. The singer and actress starred in many popular films such as Calamity Jane and Pillow Talk, and in later life she became a prominent campaigner for animal welfare. But despite her stellar success, her life was not without its challenges. She suffered a mental breakdown at one point. She had severe financial troubles as well. And according to her charitable foundation, she wished to have no funeral, memorial service or grave marker. Our correspondent David Sillito has been looking back at the career of one of the great stars of entertainment.
We'll be home tonight by the light of the silver
Doris
moon.
Day, cracking her whip as Calamity Jane. No one symbolised the Hollywood of the 50s and early 60s better. Good-natured musical escapism.
So whip back away, whip back away, whip back away.
Born Doris Kappelhoff in 1922, she had one ambition: to be a ballet dancer. But after being injured in a car crash, she began singing instead.
My love.
By 16, she was Doris Day and touring with a band. A chance film audition made her an overnight star.
You said the song begins. You speak and I hear violins. It's magic.
It was the first of a string of musicals and launched a successful recording career. But the public image belied a darker private life. Her 4 marriages ended unhappily. Her first was violent and unnervingly close to the on-screen relationship with James Cagney.
You can't tell me what to do.
In a pig's eye, I can.
George, you think you own me?
You're right, Ione. That's exactly right.
But she's best remembered for her romantic comedies. They were glamorous, witty, and very innocent.
You ain't the kind of gal who'd break a date.
No, I'm not.
And I ain't the kind of guy that'd ask you to.
I know you're not.
I'll pick you up at 8.
I'll be ready.
I had a great time, and I think that they sensed it. That fun. And wear all the gorgeous clothes and work with Rock Hudson and Jimmy Garner and Clark Gable, you know. I mean, how bad can it be?
For the public, Doris Day was the all-singing, all-smiling icon of a lost Hollywood.
Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be.
The tributes today worldwide to the great Doris Day, one of the great stars of Hollywood and indeed of the world of entertainment. She died at the age of 97. So with that, I want to go to New York and I want to talk to David Kaufman, who is author of Doris Day, The Untold Story of the Girl Next Door. And David met many of Doris Day's closest friends. Mr. Kaufman, thank you very much for joining us. What are your thoughts today at the passing of this legendary figure?
Well, I'm a little bit overwhelmed. I suppose that it was inevitable. I imagined I would outlive her because I'm considerably younger than she was, but it's still just devastating that she's gone.
Let's talk about... you're with us, David. Well done. Thank you very much. Well recovered. Let's talk about Doris Day, the character, because, of course, we're used to the screen figure. Let's talk to the character behind the scenes, if you like. How would you describe her?
I would say that she was basically pretty unhappy because what she most wanted was to have a happy family life and children, etc. And it's the one thing she never really did have. It's almost as if she imagined that one could lead a happy family life like in many of the romantic songs that she sang. But of course, most lives contain obstacles, barriers, difficulties, and hers certainly did, a great many. I think you've already alluded to the fact that her first marriage was, her first husband, Al Jordan, was very physically abusive, and she divorced him within a year of marrying him. She met him, she was a big band singer at the time, and he was one of the instrumentalists in one of the bands that she sang with. And he is the actual father of her one and only son. But after the divorce, she married a second time, and her second husband was also, he was emotionally abusive, not physically. And that led to another divorce in less than a year. And then her third husband was also her manager, Marty Melcher. And they were together until he died, but she wanted to divorce Marty, I guess it's 7 or 8 years before he died in 1960. But he would not agree to that. So instead they agreed that they would have open relationships and sleep with other people. And Doris Day certainly did.
We heard mention of, mental health problems and the fact that she suffered, a kind of a breakdown at one point. What caused that?
I think the pressures on her were enormous. She, as I said just before, she really just wanted to have a happy family life, and she did not have that. She made 39 films in 20 years while she recorded 600 recordings. And before that, she worked with the big bands for several years. She basically was working first for her mother, who put her to work, and then for her husbands, who put her to work, and ultimately for her son, Terry Melcher. When Marty Melcher married Doris, her manager, Marty Melcher, married Doris, he adopted Terry Melcher, who took his name. But it's not one thing, it was many things, but certainly the anxiety and tension of working so hard, basically for other people, because she didn't really want to be doing it herself. I think looking back, she appreciated it, but I also feel, and maybe this is a question you would get to a little bit later, that she was not appreciated enough for her acting ability. She was definitely admired for her voice, which was so pristine and clear and pure, but she was also a great actress. And one of my motivations for writing this book, which I did some years ago now, was to try and rectify that and demonstrate what a wonderful actress she was. And not only in comedies, not only in Pillow Talk, for which she was nominated for an Oscar, but she did not win. She never won an Oscar. The Kennedy Center wanted to give her a Lifetime Achievement Award. They offered it to her several times, but she refused to appear in public, and she would have had to make an appearance to receive the award, so she never got that either. But in what I consider to be her best film, which is Love Me or Leave Me, she's just, it's a stunning performance. And she is wonderful in comedies too, like Pillow Talk, but she made so many different kinds of films. She even did a film noir, a black and white film called Julie, in which she's being accosted by her husband, who was played by Louis Jourdan, and to all evidence, the two of them did actually have an affair at the time that she was making that movie.
All of which
leads
me to, I suppose I'd ask you at this point, you've given us a fantastic overview there. When we think about her career, she lived to a grand age of 97. For those appraising her career now, and you've alluded there to acting skills as well as singing skills, how will she be seen in the great pantheon of Hollywood stars?
I think that an appreciation for her acting has increased since my book was published. I can't say, without sounding a bit immodest, that it was because of my book, but the book was so successful, it became a bestseller. And the fact is, it led to so many TV interviews, and that, I think, is what created a greater admiration for her abilities as an actress. I think a lot of people saw films that they had never seen before that she was in as a result. I mean, you know, nowadays you can watch anything at any time, anywhere, but that's been true for a while. So I kind of imagine that it was all of that attention which was suddenly focused on her. When she retired, which she basically did in, well, she had her own TV show for several years in the early 80s. But by the mid-80s, she had moved to Carmel before that, Carmel, California, on the coast. Beautiful, beautiful place on the coast. I visited it. She really went into retirement, and she had nothing further to do with it. She refused to be interviewed, not just by me, by anyone. But she had her animal causes. At one point, I believe she had 27 different dogs and cats, and most of them needed medical attention. So she was basically running a pet hospital, and that's one of the reasons she had to leave Beverly Hills, because there was an ordinance against having so many pets. And that's one of the reasons she did.
It's a very nice point at which to end, David, which was, of course, the animal welfare thing. I was going to come on to it, but you very kindly raised it yourself. So thank you so much for talking to us, and it's great to talk to you today.
Thank you. Thank you
David
for having
Coughlin
me
there for us, the author in New York, and good to talk to him. Time is 9 minutes to 6, and let's return to the news which broke earlier this afternoon that Doris Day, one of the biggest names in entertainment, the biggest names in the history of Hollywood, has died at her home in California at the age of 97. The singer and actress has starred in nearly 40 films, sold millions of records. She was also a prominent animal welfare campaigner for decades. And I'm joined on the line now, I'm pleased to say, by the entertainer and fellow animal rights campaigner, Paul O'Grady. Paul, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Hugh. Absolute pleasure.
Well, Doris Day, I think we're safe to say, is one of the all-time greats.
She certainly was. She could do it all, you know. She could sing, she could dance, she could act, she could do comedy, she could do pathos. She was a true star, a proper star.
Some people see her, you know, as a very, very highly regarded actress, others more as a singer. She combined both roles.
That's right.
Just talk about her performing ability. How would you describe her?
Well, she's in one of my favourite movies with Jimmy Cagney, of all people, where he plays Ruth Etting, the torch singer. And it's a complete change for Doris Day. You know, she went from the girl next door to play a dancehall hostess, you know, with a troubled sort of relationship with this gangster played by... And she's remarkable in it. She sings, she dances, she acts. She's just sensational. She's a true all-round performer, Doris Day. And she was very modest as well about it. That was the other thing. And then she had that beautiful voice.
It's interesting, Paul, you choose that film because, of course, we were talking earlier to one of her biographers who made the point that she had a pretty turbulent private life and several marriages, and
she did,
she had a tough time, and that film in some ways tells us something about her.
It does, yeah. You see a hard edge in her in this film, which you don't normally see in the other films. She's always sweetness and light normally, but in this film, she was a great actress. She made quite a few movies where she played heavy roles, especially in the later years. But I think people always associate her as the sunshine girl next door. That's the image with the beautiful voice.
When we look at the later years, Paul, we're looking at some images now of, after she retired from making films. And of course, as you know full well, she devoted lots of her time and energy and money to animal welfare, which of course, revealed another side to her, really. And she was incredibly committed in that area. What can you tell us about that?
Well, she founded the Doris Day Animal Foundation. It wasn't just dogs that she rescued, it was horses as well. Cats, and she was known in Hollywood as the dog catcher because that was an affectionate term for her. Would leave dogs at a gate constantly, and she always tried to find homes for them. And also, she started a big campaign about spaying the animals, getting them neutered. So she was instrumental in that, which solved a lot of problems with stray dogs. But she was totally committed to animal welfare. She was remarkable. She did so much good work there.
The biographer earlier, Paul, the biographer was telling us that the reason she moved to that part of California, which was Carmel, was that where she'd been before that in Hollywood, they didn't like the fact that she kept so many animals and dogs.
No, and not only that, the noise. So you had all these dogs howling and barking and yapping. So whoever, and then I think Kim Novak as well was the same. She's into animal conservation, so she had a load of dogs as well. So between them, the racket, I think, in the Hollywood Hills was amazing.
When we look back at the career, Paul, because, lots of people qualify as a Hollywood great, but when we look at the career that Doris Day had, not just as I say, as an entertainer, but as a campaigner too, how do you think people will look back in years to come at Doris Day, the woman and the figure, if you like, that she cut?
First and foremost, I think she'll be remembered, for her films and also for her songs, for her voice. But those who knew her well, will remember her for, she was quite a tough lady when it came to animal welfare and for fighting for the underdog. She did a lot as well for campaigning, about AIDS in the early days because of Rock Hudson. She was very vocal there. She was quite a remarkable lady, really, when you think about it. There were so many sides to her, not just as an entertainer, but as a human being. She was a very caring lady.
Paul, as ever, it's great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on here, and may she rest in peace.
Indeed. Paul, thanks very much. Paul O'Grady there for us, very kindly joining us today with his thoughts on the incredible Doris Day. It's 3 minutes to 6. More on BBC News at 6 with Sophie. I'll be back at 10. Matt's with me now with the weather. Hi, Matt.
The Hollywood legend Doris Day, who has died at the age of 97. Now we can talk about Doris Day to the author Tom Santopietro, author and Broadway theatre manager, who joins us from New York. Thank you so much for being with us. What are your thoughts about Doris Day, such a legend, and being remembered today, and what we've been watching all day, really, some of those great clips from great movies?
Yeah, I think it really has struck me how far-ranging her image is and her legacy, which has been growing bigger every year in terms of record sales and DVD sales, and seeing this outpouring today just confirms it.
So do you mean there's a new generation of people who are coming across her movies and her songs?
I think there is, really, and I think it's part nostalgia, it's part, a younger generation starts watching the films with a view of irony, and then the irony gets dropped and they just have a good time.
Our reporter there, David Silate, was saying that she symbolised, in a way, the age of innocence in Hollywood in the 50s. Would you go along with that?
Yes, I think, it was such a different time then, and the studios were still powerful when Doris came up, and they could really shape images. I think what I wanted to examine in my book is that for all the innocence, Doris, in a lot of ways, was ahead of her time, because if you look at those incredibly popular movies with Rock Hudson, Jimmy Garner, Doris is always playing a career woman with a great job, fantastic clothes, a huge apartment, which as a New Yorker, I could never figure out how she could afford. But, it was a very instructive image and women in particular responded to that and thought, oh, I want that life. And at the same time, men thought she was sexy, but at the same time, somebody they could take home to meet their mother. So Doris had all the bases covered.
Okay, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, she had that sort of girl next door image in some ways, I suppose, but her off-screen life was rather complicated, shall we say, and not always happy. I think 4 marriages.
Yes, it was an extremely difficult off-screen life because her first husband actually beat her while she was pregnant, and her second husband walked out because he said, I don't want to be Mr. Doris Day. And the third husband is the one to whom she was married for 20 years. And when he died, she found out that he had stolen all her money. And so it's this enormously complicated off-screen life. And yet Doris always approached life as if the glass was half full. So, that contradiction really fascinated me, as well as the enormous talent she had.
And we are told that she left instructions that there should be no funeral for her, no memorial service, that her grave should not even be marked. It's an extraordinary psychology, isn't it, that she doesn't, in a sense, want to be remembered?
I think, she had been a Christian Scientist for a large portion of her adult life, and then she stopped attending formal services. And she had a really interesting philosophy about life and death, and she said herself, I think when everything is going right, this is heaven. This is heaven on earth right here. And it's a remarkable attitude that this screen legend, that's not what concerned her.
And then just to sum up, how will she be remembered? Obviously a Hollywood legend, there's no doubt about that, but how would you like her to be remembered, do you think?
I think I'd like her to be remembered as one of the greatest pop vocalists of the 20th century, praised by everybody from Paul McCartney to Tony Bennett, a terrific, underrated, versatile film actress, and an animal rights activist that helped change the way people took care of animals. It's a pretty wide-ranging legacy Doris Marianne Kappelhoff had.
All right, well, that's a lovely testament to her life. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from New York. Tom Santopietro, their author and Broadway theatre manager. Many thanks.
Thank you very much.